Hello and welcome to the Argyle SMB Finance Leadership Forum. My name is Brittany Sullivan with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. I have some important information to share with you, and then we will turn the floor over to our esteemed opening keynote speaker. First, we would like to take a moment to thank today's sponsors, Vertex and Divvy. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, which includes complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. We also welcome you to stay socially connected during today's event. For those of you who are active tweeters, please use the hashtag #ArgyleDigital and follow us on Twitter at @ArgyleExecForum. Also be sure to follow Argyle on LinkedIn for special announcements. I also wanted to take a moment to touch on our content neutrality policy, which we have curated based on the feedback we have received over the years from our members. We have worked closely with our speaking faculty to ensure that you receive a set of balanced and neutral viewpoints during the sessions today, and we truly appreciate our members' support of this policy. Finally, and most importantly, we would love to hear from you. So during each session, we encourage you to submit your questions and comments in the Q&A box on your screen. Following each presentation, we have set aside time for our speakers to weigh in on your questions. Thank you again for joining us. Now let's get started. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Jason Gamage, Chief Information Security Officer at Goldilock. We are excited to have Dr. Jason with us for his opening keynote titled Prioritizing SMB Security and Staying Ahead of Potential Data Breaches. Welcome, Jason, and over to you.
Thanks, Brittany. I appreciate the introduction there. All right, so let me go ahead and get it started here. So when we think about breaches, I want to stress one thing right in the beginning is that 65% of all the breaches actually attack SMBs. Most of the people think, oh, potentially because I'm a small, medium-sized business and nobody's really going to be looking at me, I'm too small. In fact, those are the people that get targeted the most. And the reason is because most of these attacks are actually automated attacks. They're scanning the IP addresses that are publicly available, constantly looking for vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities can also come from things like third parties. It could be, another vendor that you have that has access that gets breached. I mean, there's ransomware attacks that come through emails. One of the worst of ransomware attacks that fortunately we were able to prevent was when I was in the oil and gas industry, and we had the deputy general counsel clicked on a Nashville tourism newsletter in her Gmail account that was actually a targeted ransomware attack against the oil and gas company and their refineries. So, there's huge losses, and every single day I get told, just last week, one of my colleagues at Dell Technologies was telling me that they get 4 to 5 calls a week for asking for help on dealing with ransomware attacks. And this is just the local branch office here. So it's this is happening all over the place. And in fact, like I said, SMBs typically get hit more often than larger enterprises. And a lot of that that happens because of the fact that SMBs do not have the budget. They don't put the attention towards protecting themselves potentially the same way that a larger organization might do that. Okay, so part of that problem. Why does this happen? It's like connectedness is probably maybe a new word for you, but connectedness means, is out of control. What that means is that people are actually migrating things to the cloud. People are connecting devices constantly to the internet. Everything is connected. It's on the internet. And because of that, that means that any vulnerability that's in anywhere, in any software, in any operating system, in any application, in any device itself, it's like configurations inside of your operating system, for instance, could be vulnerable. These things that are connected to the internet, the attackers are able to find those holes and they're able to exploit them to be able to have attacks against your company. And again, it's like with SMBs, you're just as likely to get hit as anybody else. Well, even more likely to get hit. The point is that everybody is getting hit. Cyber breaches alone are costing $6 trillion annually. This is, a really, really unfortunate thing that happens, but also because of the way that it works. These attackers typically are criminals. And they do make money off of it. And because of that type of revenue that they generate from doing these types of ransomware attacks, it's a very, very lucrative business for them. And they do treat it as such. But they're not only criminals involved in this. There's also terrorist organizations and nation states that are becoming much more prevalent in attacks against companies and against infrastructure inside of all countries. And some of this stuff soon, we're going to probably seeing a lot more of these cyber breaches, against, things like ports, against oil refineries, like the one that I worked at, where they're going to be successful, they're going to get through, and they're going to cause something to blow up, and people's lives are going to be compromised because of that. So, I mean, these are very serious problem, and it's continuing to grow. It's not slowing down. It's actually increasing every single year. What does that mean? All right. So I want to talk a little bit about, 3 key functionalities that I think are essential to, modern cybersecurity. And, I'm going to call them shields up, lights out, and big red button. Okay. So, and this has to do with a strategy that I think that everyone should take to be able to deal with cybersecurity these days. Things have changed from what they were 20 years ago. I've been in cybersecurity now coming up on 33 years. And I can tell you from when I started, the way that things happened, it was just, you got a virus. So that was pretty much the only thing that happened. Nowadays, there are so many more ways for people to be able to get in and be able to take advantage of those vulnerabilities. And because of so many more things are being connected and there's so many applications out there, that means that the vulnerabilities are just always available. So one of the things, and CISA is one of the CISA is one of the organizations that started talking about Shields Up, which is, how do you prepare, and then let me get into the next slide. Actually, I think I'll go ahead and talk a little bit more about it. So part of these strategies, one of the things that I always say is, if you think about how the bad guys get in, and you have to assume that they're already in potentially, because if you haven't been breached, you probably just don't know you have. It's, most companies have been breached at this point. And if they haven't, they're on the verge of having that happen. So instead of thinking about how do we prevent these things from happening, we actually have to be a little smarter. So what we have to do is start thinking about things like shields up. This is how we detect when somebody gets in. And it also means not just, using solutions like, EDRs, endpoint protection, being able to put some type of software on your endpoints, your laptops, for instance, that it's looking for any type of, not just malware, because it's not signature based anymore. It's looking for heuristics. It's looking for some type of a behavior that says that this is not your normal behavior and that it could be malicious, and it's able to stop it. And then using XDR, which is extended detection and response. What this adds in is a lot of network capabilities and other things that are normally around security, and bringing it together into an overall system. And managed defense, or managed detection and response is something that I think that even small businesses small medium-sized businesses should be using. And that's, MDR is the abbreviation for this. And that means not just looking at something from just that endpoint, but also, from the network perspective. Because again, it's being able to detect once something actually gets in, not just, before it gets in, or stopping it or increasing that. But now that we assume that they're going to be able to get in, we have to ask ourselves something. And this is something that I've been trying to teach. And I've spent a lot of time speaking about this in other conferences, is I got a new concept that I want, people to think of. The first thing when you think about how do I protect my sensitive data, my confidential information, you start thinking about access control, passwords, logins. You think about encryption, and that's the first things you start thinking about. But what you absolutely need to first ask yourself is, does it need to be on the internet? Because if it doesn't, then why are you putting it on the internet? Because if you do, it's vulnerable. Anything connected to the internet is absolutely vulnerable. So, the first question is, does it need to be on the internet? Well, the answer is no, then stop putting it on the internet. If you say, yes, it does need to be on the internet, the next question I would ask is, does it need to be 24/7? I mean, does it always have to be on the internet? So we start looking at ways to be able to isolate some of this information off. We still put in the access control and the encryption, but we also figure out ways to, using air gaps as an example, to be able to remove some information from being always available on the internet. So, and, when you're starting to plan this in the beginning, instead of also being able to detect something that's happening inside your network, you got to prepare for it. So taking some of those things off the internet and not having them available to be able to be attacked is pretty critical. And one of those is, your restoration data. Backup data is, and how to restore your business is absolutely critical. And I guarantee you, when you get a ransomware attack, this is the first thing that they're trying to target, because if they get into that, that means that you can't restore. And if you do restore, you're using their malware, that's been installed into that to be able to do the restoration. You're spreading their malicious software on their behalf because it's in your backup data. So, one of the things that we say is, okay, well, also, does it, remember, it doesn't have to be on the internet all the time. Well, I'm going to use this example as a small, medium business, a dentist office. Dentist office isn't open 24/7. There's no reason why their data needs to be, out there and available 24/7. In fact, if you just disconnect it in off hours, you're 76% off the internet compared to the way you would be. Unless you work, weekends, but let's not get into semantics with that. But the point is that, disconnecting after hours, it becomes almost like a light switch. And this is what we call, the lights out. It's like turn off things that don't need to be connected when they don't need to be. And having an easy way to be able to reconnect them is also something that you want to be able to put into place. And you want to be able to control vendor access. They don't always have to have access into your network. You want to be able to disconnect that and then reconnect it when it happens. For instance, I was working recently at a school system, and they have vendors that need to get into the CCTV systems occasionally, but this has sensitive data. It's got children, in school, it's recording this. So what they need to do is make sure that, they don't let the vendor get in all the time. So somebody has to be able to enable that account and then disable it as soon as they're done, the vendor's done having that access. Otherwise, the vendor account could be compromised and that data could be accessed anytime. So that's talking about, timed access. So lights out. You don't want to always have things that don't need to be on disconnected, and you want to be able to potentially turn off parts of your business or segments of your network that aren't going to be used over the weekend. Turn them off. It's like if somebody needs to have them on over the weekend, make a request, do it that way, or get, a fully automated remote, air gap system, which allows you to open and close these things, at on demand. Okay, so then the last thing is we're talking about reacting. So this is that, what I like to call big red button. It's like here at Goldilocks, we call it also a ransomware kill switch. And this is something that's really, really important. So you've got the detection, and I'm going to use an example in just a minute about the Port of Houston and how they were able to be the only port so far that really has survived a full-on ransomware attack against them. And what happened was they first detected that they were being under attack. They reacted quickly, and the way they did that is they killed their connections. Okay, so this is really important. Now, unfortunately, being able to kill some segment of the network when you have an indication of compromise isn't always the easiest thing. And I mentioned that, Goldilocks, we call our solution the ransomware kill switch. And the reason is because anybody can make that decision to cut that segment of the network when there's some type of indication of compromise. You get notified that there's something going on. You're able to then cut it off, isolate it so it doesn't spread throughout the whole entire organization. Because even if you're cloud-based as an organization, or you have a lot of people remote, they're still connecting into cloud solutions, and it's able to spread that way through to all the endpoints. Not just inside of an enterprise. It can go quite wide. So being able to cut off that segment of that system or anything like this that's connected in somewhere in your data center, being able to isolate a VLAN, these are really important things to be able to do. So you got to be able to react quickly to be able to cut it off. Because the problem is when you do it the traditional way, you end up having some type of indication of compromise. Being a security guy, usually I'm one of the people that might notice it. And then I make a call and say, hey, we got something going on. And then you have to, and this is the word that's always used, chase down the IT guy, and the IT guy who can actually disconnect these things these always happen on a Friday night, and they're always out to dinner, with their wife, and you have to call him and he's like, yeah, I'll get right on it. And that means, 1-2 hours, at the minimum. And that takes too long. That much time, it means that you're fully compromised. Your network's been compromised. They most likely got into your backups by that time. You can react quickly, like the Port of Houston did. They detected it, they immediately isolated it, and now here's the important thing. You got to be able to recover. So that goes back into that first part, which is the shields up, and it actually comes back into play again because you need to isolate off your backup data. And when I say this, it's really important to understand that this does apply to even small, medium-sized businesses. Because if you want to restore your company and you don't want to pay the ransomware and you want to do it quickly and not have any interruption, loss of reputation, having to have loss of, or having to have problems with, your customers not being able to get in, or, in my case, the parent portal in the school district in Los Angeles is still down from their ransomware attack this year. or just last year. And this is, really important that you have this data, offline. And I have a healthcare company actually that recently was just asked, they were told by their cyber insurance that if they didn't isolate their backup data by air gapping it, their rates were going to go up. So they had till the end of last year, which, we were able to help with, to be able to get that backup data, isolated and, air gapped off the network. So again, air gap is a terminology that's used for segmenting off something physically from the internet. Oftentimes it means, you want to just unplug the Ethernet cable so that segment is no longer connected. It typically was used in the industrial control systems in the old days, but nowadays it's something that you use, even in all businesses. All right, so I wanted you to consider, a couple things, when you're thinking about what can I do? Okay, so, these are the problems. These are some of, how you got to go about doing it, but what can I do? So one of the things we were going to talk about was about how do you protect against data breaches and compliance issues. This is by far probably one of the biggest ones that I end up dealing with, and where I get, asked to come in and do some forensics investigation is data breaches that they aren't sure if they lost personal data or not, but they need to have it checked because they've lost something was, somebody hacked in somewhere, and they want to know, do I have to report to, one of the state's attorney generals or GDPR, into Europe? It's like other countries like, UAE here, we have PDPL and even some more strict laws, around this. The point is that, you have to report in if you suspect that there's been a data breach. If for a GDPR, you have 72 hours to report in to Belgium to let them know that you even suspect that you might have one, not even that you've proven it. You no longer can do what something like Uber was investigating for a year and a half before they finally said, yes, there was a data breach. Well, it was pretty clear that wasn't really the case. The CISO was found to have committed some fraud there. But the point is nowadays you can't do that. You have to report it. And if you enable something so simple, which is whole drive encryption onto your systems, if you lose a laptop, you don't lose data and you don't have to investigate it as a data breach. It's just a piece of hardware and a simple cost that's lost. Business insurance probably will cover that cost, or even its impact would be minor compared to if you actually have to report that you lost some customer data. The absolute very first fine in the United States, when they enacted more laws about this and started fining, was Wells Fargo employee lost a laptop that had customer data on it, and it wasn't encrypted. We don't know what the laptop, if somebody found it and just, stole the laptop, said, hey, I got a free laptop, or if they actually accessed the data or anything, it doesn't matter. The point is that data was not encrypted. So once it was lost, it was out of their control. And now just turning on this whole drive encryption, it's free in Windows and it's free in Apple, and both of those meet your compliance requirements. I absolutely recommend you do whole hard drive encryption as soon as possible. Endpoint protection. If you don't have a good solution, and I'm not talking about, using, for instance, Microsoft's built-in, Defender, or not doing something on a Mac because Macs you think are not vulnerable to viruses. That's actually not correct. And Microsoft's solution is not one of the better solutions. If you go out and look at, the Gartner quadrant, it'll tell you all kinds of different ones. I personally work with a number of the top ones, and they're all extremely good at doing what they do. And this is that, being able to detect that there's something wrong going on and stopping it and protecting it. It's like vulnerability management is a huge area here. You need to make sure, even if you're a small business and you put out a website or an application, you need to make sure that it's not vulnerable, that it doesn't have holes. Otherwise, you might be that third party, supply chain that's introducing vulnerabilities to another customer, and you're going to be held responsible for that. And if you have your own customers, you have your own business, it's like, or, in this case, let's say a financial department, it's like, you don't want to be using some type of software that hasn't been updated and it's vulnerable, and somebody gets in and starts, messing with your, with your finance system. It's like the access that they can have could be, absolutely complete. So, you have to have a system in place no matter what. You have to be checking for these vulnerabilities, and you need to be patching them. You need to be making sure that you take care of these. This is one of the major causes of data breaches that lead towards, having to make disclosures, that you lost customer data or in something that disrupts business. it's usually always caused by that. One of the last companies that I worked at that had a ransomware attack, it came in because they hadn't patched their Exchange server in over 2 years. And because of that, there was a vulnerability that was exploited, and the hacker was actually in their system for 8 months before they actually acted on it. And that was they completed their infiltration of ransomware and enacted it, enabled it, they turned it on. So, again, it's like I get back into disconnect to protect is a good theme. It's like disconnect the things you don't need to have there and be able to disconnect that ransomware kill switch when you need to, as fast, as rapidly as you can. So, talking about this a little bit, this is like jumped a little fast to there, if you said the future, but here we go. So, it's like for Windows, you have BitLocker. It's free. It's built into the Windows operating system, and it's very simple to turn on. There's also the ability to manage it with using, for instance, Intune or other management solutions. If you want to have an IT organization that manages all of your systems, I highly recommend, just turn it on. That way you have the recovery keys in the company and you're able to do it. If not, it's like, just have, either IT or even individuals turn them on. It's better to not have access to a system than to lose a system that anybody has access to. Same thing on, inside of your Mac systems, it's file vault encryption. It's free. It's included in the system. Turn it on. You have management software like Jamf. It works great to be able to help manage it from a enterprise standpoint, but please turn these on your laptops. It's one of the things that scares me the most is when I know that there's tons of information out there on these machines and they're not encrypted. Okay, so I talked a little bit about the managed detection and response. So I want to make sure that I make sure I say that it's a mix of network and endpoint security. And there are nowadays a lot of companies out there, and I work with a couple, that actually, including my own, I should say, but anyways, what we do is, we have an outsourced, a full solution for managed detection and response. And it has a set subscription price. You pay a monthly fee and you're able to then be able to get all of the services that are included in MDR for a set monthly fee, which is easy for your finance teams to be able to know what is the budget, what's it going to cost. It's easy for the IT team because they're outsourcing their security without having to hire somebody and have them integrate into the organization and figure out where things are. It's like, this is a great way to be able to bring that capability of actual experts into your organization without needing to hire somebody who says that they're a security expert, but you don't know because you're not a security expert. And you find out, that they're not because you got ransomware hit, and you find out that he actually just was an IT guy who said he was a security expert. Unfortunately, this is a case that's happening all over the place. There's not enough people to fill the jobs. With over 4 million cybersecurity jobs available, it's it's a pretty lucrative, I should say, CV fudging job to try to get into. So, to be able to have, good people and effectively combat, the threat actors, it's absolutely, critical that you do have a solution that does span both network and endpoints. And this means, whether you outsource it or you do it internally, you need to do both of those, not just, turning on some antivirus from Microsoft that was free in Windows on your machines. That's not going to cut it. Okay, and I want to talk, again, a little bit about that managed detection and response service. You don't have to read everything. I just wanted to show you that, typical MDR is going to include, some things. These is not by far the complete list, but these are the things that they do when they offer the service to you. And, one of the ones that I know, is $11 a month per user for a complete solution that covers everything. It's really not that much, cost overall when you think of how much it costs to hire, a security expert to begin with. And you have to stop thinking of security as part of IT as a cost. You actually have to think of it like insurance, because that's really what we are. We are insurance against being hit with something that could be very expensive for the company to handle. It's typically millions of dollars of damages, and if you get hit by ransomware, in the amount of time that you have to spend to recover. The typical, business never gets away with it for less than, hundreds of thousands of dollars, even for small businesses. It's just, and it's taking companies out of business completely. So you have to think of security as insurance. And this is part of what you can do. If you have a set monthly cost, for outsourcing it because you can't afford or you can't acquire the right type of talent, it's like at least do something like this so that you have some professional people that are able to be able to give some of this protection. And you got to look at it not as a cost like IT. It really is different. This is focused on your business processes, not on your IT. It's, completely about that. And if you think about it from as an insurance standpoint, it's a lot easier to swallow what some of those costs are. I'm going to mention, Goldilocks because Goldilocks is, is my company. And, one of the things that we developed is that fully automated remote air gap, which allows you to use an SMS one-time password triggered command to be able to disconnect completely from the internet. So when these are 12, this is actually a 12-port device. Top one's a 4-port device. They're paired. It's got a physical switch inside of it. So it's not logical disconnection. It's actual physical. So that, and you can do it anywhere within seconds from anywhere, using your phone and one-time password. So this is one of the examples of being able to, you put your backup data, your restoration data behind, disconnect it. You have an indication, you can use it as a kill switch. And there are both, devices designed for an SMB as well as rack mountable 1U units. If you want to know more information about it, reach out to me. Okay, so anything connected to the internet is vulnerable to compromise, ultimately putting our entire societal structure at risk, because that's what's actually happening. You have to assume that bad guys are already in and be prepared. Think of cybersecurity like in insurance. Invest in your future. It is really dangerous out there. SMBs, 65% of all breaches, that's happening to the SMBs. So don't think if you're an SMB that you're not included, because you're actually the ideal person that a hacker wants to go after. Less security, easy to get in, lots of vulnerabilities. It's a great environment. You want to isolate data, and devices and networks and critical infrastructure if it doesn't need to be connected to the internet 24/7. Manage your vulnerabilities, protect, your endpoints. If you do nothing else, at least get really good endpoint protection. And, do not assume that just because you're small, no one will attack you. Keep your restoration data offline. You cannot recover your business if you don't, because they're going to go after that first. If they get in, they don't just turn on this malware immediately. They get in and they spread it, and they spread it until they can get to everything that they need to. Then they turn it on once they've completely spread. This is an active attack that takes time, and they're very patient about doing it the right way. And that's the way they take down your business completely, is because they activate all of them at once. They want to get as far spread as you can. Manage and encrypt your mobile devices, stay out of those compliance issues. So that's my presentation. If you do need any advice or you want to outsource your MDR, XDR, security operations, you can reach out to me at my email or the CyberSense One website. And do we have any questions, Brittany, that looks interesting? I know I kind of took almost all the time.
Yeah,
Which
no,
we
thank you.
talked about. I always do this. I always talk too much and never leave time for questions. But if you do have questions, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. My profile is right up there and pretty easy to find. And you can send me questions. I do respond to the messages on my LinkedIn, and always follow me if you're interested in more things I post. Brittany, anything?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jason, for such an excellent presentation. We did have a few questions come through. It looks like we have time to answer at least one or two of them. This first question asks, other than constant training and warnings about security with employees, is there anything else we can do with employees?
Yeah. Okay. So with employees, it's, you're talking about changing the culture, I still, some people are against it, but I really like a good phishing tool. And what that does is it trains your employees not to click on phishing email. I've had too many incidences where there's malware has been introduced just because of simple phishing. We run it in our own company. It sends out fake phishing, emails that are pretty sophisticated. I use a company called Fish Firewall for that. And it has an AI behind it. It figures out what the employee's department is, the type of emails to send to them, and it starts getting them to look closely at everything that they receive. So, beyond your standard security training, to get your employees to behave better is to hold them accountable. And the only way you can do that really is, somewhat is with that actual real life phishing simulations. KnowBe4 also has a solution for that, and that helps your users just get a lot better at it. Again, whoever asked that question, reach out to me. I'll tell you some more about some of the strategies that I use when I'm building a program to be able to change the culture, because it's really about changing culture.
Perfect, thank you. And it looks like we have time to squeeze in one last question. When you referenced 65% of all breaches attack SMBs, how do you define SMB? What size is this?
That's a good question. Usually, honestly, I don't have a size that I do, but it's for me, an SMB is somewhere between small medium business is less than 1,000 users. But for the statistic that I got, I don't remember what they used for it. I'd have to look that up, and I can get that for you. If whoever asked that question sends me a note, I will send you the link to the article that I got this information from.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much again, Jason, for such an insightful presentation. That is all the time we have for audience questions. But I did want to thank everyone who joined us today for this session. This session, along with all of today's content, will be made available on demand following this event. Thank you so much again, Jason.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.